Gear up, faster and easier. Huge dungeon changes coming in Season 4. We've talked about it before. Mythic Plus is getting a complete revamp, all new system in the way we do Mythic Plus, and of course, Fated Rating is also coming in Season 4, and all this is coming in a couple weeks. Blizzard's already told us 10.2.6 will hit, and then a couple weeks later, Season 4 begins. So let's see what Signs of Kalani has to say about the season that is coming very soon.
Hey folks, this is Kalani. Patch 10.2.6 didn't go live this week to the disappointment of many, but we are finally starting to see some new information make its way through the woodwork. In a blue post today, the dev team unveiled some huge changes coming to dungeons in Season 4. Almost every dungeon difficulty is going to be much harder, but rewards you with better gear. The Mythic Plus system is being cut down and streamlined, and overall, gearing up could end up being quite a bit easier. There's a lot of information in this post, so let's break it all down. Now before we jump in, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another video. We finally have our first look at what will be changing as we head into Season 4 of Dragonflight. This should be the last season of the expansion before we move on to the War Within, and from what we understand, it should be a fated season just like the end of Shadowlands. That means we might see quite a few experiments thrown in just to change things up a bit more than a usual season.
You know what, and I think this is fine. Like, if they want to do something risky, this is the best time to do it. Because the end of the expansion, who gives a shit? Like, you're already cocked on all your gear. You can change up the gearing style a little bit, do what they're doing here, introduce a new system, see if you want to implement it in the next expansion. Because what really matters in Season 4? Absolutely nothing. We're getting pre-patch this summer. We're getting pre-patch here in a couple months pre-expansion patch. So who cares? Who cares? It's all going to be irrelevant. All of our gear is going to be out-geared by the time we hit, we're 8 levels into the next expansion. We're going to replace all of our current gear with freaking blue gear from the next expansion. So I like what Blizzard's doing here. Take a risk. Take a risk. Last year they did Fated Rating. That was kind of cool. This year they're doing Fated again, but they're also changing up Mythic Plus completely. I applaud Blizzard for doing this. This is a good idea. Why not? Let's see how it works. And if we don't like it, guess what? Fuck it. We'll change it for the first season of the next expansion.
Change we have to look at is for dungeons and how that end game option is going to work.
Yeah, Lazarus, I do think it'll be 8 hours.
In previous seasons, we've had normal dungeons and heroic dungeons, which were very similar item level rewards on the lower end of things. These difficulties are the only dungeons you can queue for using the random group finder, and the Mythic 0 was a little bit higher than that, but you have to make and join groups manually, and then Mythic Plus takes over and scales the difficulty and rewards up to the current maximum. With how close the rewards for normal and heroic dungeons are, they're more or less the same thing, and most folks skipped over those difficulties entirely to head straight into Mythic 0 or just the lower end of Mythic Plus Keystones. This left the bottom end of dungeons kind of empty, so that's one.
Yeah, this is why this is a good change, because who the hell was doing Mythic 0 anyways? Who was doing that shit? You're at the beginning of the season to get your first key, but then after that, you're just jumping into other people's keys to start Mythic Plus. Nobody was doing Mythic 0, so this was a good change, because on the low end, heroic dungeons and Mythic 0 dungeons, I guarantee you, were ghost towns the entire expansion. Nobody does that stuff.
One of the main problems the dev team is trying to address. In Season 4, normal will stay where it is, down at the bottom, rewarding you with the lowest item level gear. Heroic dungeons will be moved to where Mythic 0 dungeons usually are, but you will still be able to queue into them, so be able to get the equivalent of Mythic 0 dungeon gear through the random group finder in Season 4.
Yeah, and it's not going to be timed, so this is really good for people who are maybe leveling alts. This is a great entry gearing use now for heroic dungeons. Now heroic dungeons can be basically used to start out your gearing process. Whereas before you kind of skipped them.
Much higher item level gear when compared to previous seasons. Now the difficulty will also match Mythic 0, so heroic dungeons will be quite a bit harder when compared to previous seasons as well. So you do get better gear, but it's not going to be for free. You still have to overcome the difficulty spike to get your shiny loot. Curiously, Mythic difficulty changes and mechanics will not be included, so while things like health and damage of monsters should be scaled up, mechanics will remain limited, so the difficulty spike shouldn't actually be too bad. Speaking of difficulty spikes, Mythic Zero dungeons are moving way up in the world, and they will be about as hard as Mythic plus 10 Keystones were previously and reward the equivalent item level gear. They should be a bit easier because they won't have any affixes, so that means no fortified or tyrannical, as well.
No affixes. What a glorious thing. What a glorious thing. Yeah, no affixes is a great change for that. I'm happy to see that. There will also be no timers or if affixes or limitations. Changing specializations or talents will be allowed on these as well. So this is a great way to kind of get into it, dip your toe into Mythic Plus, and learn the system a little bit, right? Learn a kind of, learn the routes maybe as a tank, if you want to do that. Of course, me, I just go in blind, dig first, and I figure it out as I'm going, and people get pissed off at me, but screw it. I'm Samiccus, I do what I want. So this would be a great entry. This is a great entryway into Mythic Plus. That's what I like about this, and it's going to reward you some pretty good gear. When is the next T-Mod comp? Maybe next Tuesday, depending on how much of this 10.2.6 content is. Yeah, maybe next Tuesday. Or, Monday. Yeah, maybe Monday. Samiccus is an affix. True.
There's no smaller affixes like volcanic or bursting, etc., but that still leaves Mythic Zero dungeons being much more difficult when compared to previous seasons, and vastly more rewarding. The other super important factor is that because they are Mythic Zero dungeons, they will not have a timer, and each boss should drop loot individually. That means you can take as long as you want to progress
individual
and complete
loot
the dungeon,
will happen, yeah.
and even if you don't make it all the way to the end, you can still get some loot from each boss individually.
That's great.
Mythic Zero will still remain on a weekly lockout though, so your available runs will be limited. Mythic Plus then picks up after that as per usual, just starting about 10 levels higher than normal, so we'll head into plus 2s and the current rewards cap out at plus 10. Affixes will be introduced at plus 2, plus 5 and plus 10, and dungeon ratings will also be equivalent to what they represent in the current system, and achievements should be updated to follow the same progression. So
I think this is a great thing, because on the low end, who the hell was doing that shit anyways? Everyone was just pushing into the, mid to high keys for the most part. So, on the low end, it was kind of emptied and silly. Now the low end dungeons will give you good gear. They're a good training mechanism. They've kind of separated heroic and normal. There's a bigger gap between them, which is good because heroic was just a skipping step. Nobody did heroic anymore. Everyone was just jumping into mythic. So that's great. Heroic is now relevant again, and then the Mythic Plus stuff becomes harder a bit quicker, but also rewards better gear. It's kind of like what I've talked about. I wish they would do with raiding. Because rating right now, Mythic rating is broken. It's stupid as shit. Nobody does it. Heroic rating is really where it's at, but Heroic rating is a bit too easy. So I've said this before. I've said it. You got to widen the gap a bit between normal and Heroic at this point. And then Mythic, I don't even know what they should do with it. I don't think Mythic rating personally should even be a thing. Maybe make it a transmog shit. It drops transmog and that's about it. But I don't think it should give the best gear in the game because only 0.001% of players can even do it. And it's just, that's a silly piece of content having a game that majority of your player base cannot even ever do. I'm not salty, no. It's just, it doesn't make sense to me. Why are you having devs create fights that 99.99% of your player base are never going to see? Hates anything he can't do? It's just, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. People love Classic WoW, and rating in that is a freaking joke. It's a joke, honestly. It's so easy. So, to me, make Heroic a bit more difficult. I'm fine with that. But make it the end game. Heroic should be the end game. Widen the gap a bit, just like they did here, and make the best gear drop from Heroic.
We have a realm to destroy.
Sweet Zenil, thank you for the follow. Welcome to our Scourge. Sam is a joke. My stream is a joke. My life is a joke.
Dungeons on a plus 5 should give you the same rating as completing all
Actually,
of the previous season's plus 15 dungeons, and we will probably then see portal rewards for plus 10 keys in Season 4 instead of plus 20. Now, thankfully, Blizzard also gave us a nice little progression chart to help visualize these changes, so we can see
they're widening the gap a bit.
Heroic moves up to the Mythic Zero position.
Nobody was doing this. This was skippable content. You do the normal shit while you're questing, and then you never go into normal again, and then you just jump straight into Mythic. Who the hell was doing Heroic? Absolutely nobody. So you widen the gap a bit to make Heroic relevant again, and then Mythic content is, it's a bit more squished. Because what was the difference between a plus 3 and a plus 4 key? Or a plus, a 14 and a 15. Nothing. There was no difference in terms of I would go in blind. I could not tell you by a taste test of these Mythic Pluses what the difference was between the two. But I could tell you what the difference was between a 10 and a 20, yeah. So, yeah, they squished them down. So now there's more of a difference between each level. and that makes sense. And they made heroic relevant again. It's perfect. I think they did a great job with this. I like the stuff. It's the most popular endgame content in the game right now, and Sam wants to cancel it. What? Mythic Plus? No, Mythic Plus is great. You talking about Mythic rating? Mythic rating can still be a thing. Just make it a transmog thing. Make it a race to world first. That's fine. Race to world first. Do it. It's exciting. We'll watch it. And of course, the people who do Mythic rating will still be rewarded with a cool piece of transmog that everyone else can see, and they can walk around and say, "Wow, that guy's got a huge dick. Look at him. He did Mythic rating." Yeah, that's fine. That's all you really want at the end of the day in an MMO is to be recognized for your achievements. But I still think the best gear should drop from heroic because that's what the majority of people are going to do. you keep breaking DK, yes.
Position. Mythic 0 moves up to where Mythic 10 used to be, and then Mythic Plus continues as normal.
Kill guilds and communities. Sam wants to kill WoW. No, guilds are already dying. That's everywhere. Have you seen the news about how many guilds are disbanding? You know why they're disbanding? Because Mythic rating isn't fun anymore. And there just isn't enough people who can do Mythic rating at that high of a level. It's gotten arbitrary, silly. You need a 2,000 add-ons plus some sidekick to be running your PC at the same time, making sure that all the add-ons and weak auras are working properly. You got to get divorced from your wife. Send your kids to an orphanage to be able to do Mythic rating at this point because of the kind of time that you need to get it done. It's just silly. It's just silly. Nobody got time for it, and it's a lot of content created by the devs that nobody's ever going to experience. So why have it there?
Streamline the entire endgame dungeon system and squish everything
together. I work hard when you could just buy cutting edge.
You should also see fewer ranges for Mythic Plus key levels and groups. Instead of +2s up to +20s, the vast majority of folks will just be running 0s or +2s to +10s.
Sounds like a
now
nightmare.
It's important to stress that the difficulty at the top end there is not supposed to change that much between the points being compared. So a +5 should be about as hard as a +15 previously. A +10 should be around a +20. So the top end isn't really changing that much outside of the number attached to the keystone. We're just cutting out the first 10 Mythic Plus keystone levels and moving the starting point up.
This makes each keystone level more relevant. That's what I was saying. Like a lot of the times, right now, 20 keystone levels, it made no sense because most of the time there was no difference between a 13 and a 14. Who gives a shit? At least this time now, every time you move up a keystone level, there's some relevancy to it. It makes sense. Yeah. Because the game has been dumbed down to your average player. Good. Make it dumb for the average player. Make it fun. The game challenges and games are fine, and I'm not saying make heroic the end game as it currently stands. I said make heroic a little bit harder. Make it just a little bit harder, right? So there's still a challenge involved in it, but not so challenging that the vast majority, I'm talking about like a crazy majority of players can never do it. That's silly.
Also gave us a chart of gear rewards to look at, so we don't have to guess how these changes will affect the reward structure of dungeons, and it also then gives us an idea of what item levels we'll be working with for Season 4. This might be hard to read for some folks, so with a bit of magic we can whip this into something that might be easier to read. So right off the bat we can see that the rewards for heroic dungeons are increasing significantly. Remember that you can run these as often as you want, and you can queue into them, so getting a group should be easy peasy. This update is really going to change how folks gear up, and just make dungeons more relevant.
Oh damn, weekly vault 489, holy crap. But now the end game is going to be 522. Yeah, you got to remember that too, compared to what it currently is, 483. But that's freaking big. Look at that shit.
While heroic dungeons should be harder than previous season heroic dungeons, they should also be a bit easier when compared to previous season's Mythic Zeros due to the Mythic mechanics not being included.
So
it's still very accessible for all types of players. You just get way better gear for doing it. Another huge item level jump comes in for the weekly vault rewards for completing heroic dungeons. So not only does this make gearing up easier for everyone who can run heroic dungeons thanks to the higher gear from the dungeons themselves, but now you can also properly take part in the weekly vault system.
There you go, yeah, it's
great. I know
that
heroic dungeons already count for the weekly vault right now, but the rewards aren't really worth getting excited over. But with the rewards being bumped up to item level 489 in your weekly vault just for running heroic dungeons, suddenly reset day is going to be a lot more fun.
Yeah, I agree.
Then we have a big gap to the new Mythic Zero rewards, which are 1 of 8 champion, which is already insane. That's the same as normal raid loot usually.
Good.
And the upgrade potential on champion gear is huge, and that's clocking in at item level 493 in Season 4.
So I mean, this is going to speed up your gearing process, really. That's what it's going to do. I mean, this whole thing, like I said, there's way too many keystone levels. There was no difference between a lot of these. Look at the 13/14, 11, 12. Like, what the hell's the difference between these? Absolutely, like a minor percentage increase in health or something, or damage from the bosses. Like, it's so minute you would never feel it. So this is good. Like, now you can legitimately look at a keystone level and you're like, okay, this is what it means. This is a level 2. This is a level 5. There's a difference between them. It makes sense. And the amount of gear you're going to get, that eye level is really nice. Man, look at that. A plus 10, 522. Nice. So, I mean, and basically the 10 is the 20. The 8 is the 18. Like, they're just, it's a squish down, which is good.
Get 493
the best thing they did
or
is what they
higher
do with
item
Heroic.
level just for running Mythic 0 dungeons. The weekly vault also goes
Do
up
the
to
plus 25, let's see how
6
it
or
goes.
1 of 6 hero gear, so champion gear from the dungeons themselves, and then hero gear from the weekly vault, and that's all without stepping foot
Lazarus.
into a Mythic plus keystone. So no affixes, no timers, just Mythic 0 dungeons. I think they definitely hit the mark here when they were aiming to make these dungeons more rewarding. From there, we see the usual expected increments as you work through the Mythic plus Keystone system, ending with 509 rewards from the end of plus 9 dungeons, while the weekly rewards will cap out at 522 from completing plus 10s in the week. That also gives us an idea of where Myth gear is going to cap out. If 2 of 4 Myth gear is item level 522, then 4 of 4 Myth gear should be 6 item levels higher at 528. So we're going to be running around in much higher item level gear as Season 4 progresses. Now, while I love the idea of streamlining
we are going to
the
gear out like crazy. Holy, yeah, they're streamlining the system essentially. We're going to gear out so damn crazy in this last season because you also have faded rating. You're going to have faded rating with the upgrade in gear, plus this stuff. Holy crap, everyone's going to go big helicopter dick this last part of the expansion here.
4 progresses. Now, while I love the idea of streamlining the system and offering higher item level gear for the non-timed versions of endgame dungeons, this does cut out quite a few stepping stones in terms of gear progression. There's a 16 item level gap between normal and heroic dungeons now. That's pretty huge, and overcoming that difficulty gap could be challenging for some newer players or more casual oriented players. But then there's another 17 item level jump between heroic dungeons and Mythic 0 dungeons, and you'll have extra mechanics and abilities to worry about in the dungeon. This creates a much larger difficulty gap when compared to the previous heroic to Mythic 0 dungeon spike, so while the system being more streamlined certainly looks easier to break into and it's more accessible for folks who don't usually push higher dungeons, it might actually end up being harder to get a foot in the door. There are some ways to reduce that difficulty.
It might be harder, but with the heroic jump, yes, it's more difficult, but like I said, most people, I think, will be able to do that. I think most people could, because Heroic's going to be basically Mythic 0. I think most people can do that. I think most people in the game can do a Mythic 0. It's not that difficult. You got to remember, too, they're going to get loot from every boss, so they're going to gradually out-gear it, which is great, even if they're not finishing the dungeons. Of course, at the top end, you know, a 10 is now a 20. Okay, that'll be more difficult, but also more rewarding at the end of the day. And it's really the same thing. It's just a squish down. It's just a cleanup of the process. Numbers are going to drop off hard in the last season? I don't think so. Sam, you can barely do a Mythic 0. What are you talking about? I do a plus 20 every week. I can show you right now. I got a plus 20 in my vault. I don't think numbers are going to drop off at all. I think content's going to come hard and fast this last season. We're going to get Season 4. Then we're getting 10.2.7. Then we're getting the War Within beta. Then we're getting War Within pre-patch. Then we're getting the War Within. No, I actually think numbers are going to increase here towards the end. And this whole system, this squish system, is just going to bring, I think, more people are going to be able to catch up quicker. You're just going to get in and do a heroic, get that Mythic Plus gear, 0 gear, go do some faded rating, get that shit. I think it's going to definitely be. So did you finish? Yeah, I finished. I got a 20, I think I'm at a 2,500 rating. Like, I mean, yeah, I finished a 20 timed on almost every single thing. Mind you, I take that shit. I don't get carried. You're going to be spending
a lot more time in heroic dungeons. You can spam them as often as you want, giving you much easier access to higher item levels of adventurer gear. Second, upgrading your gear is going to be a lot more important. With the upgrade feature, gear rewards aren't really static anymore, so you can upgrade items to help bridge the gap to the next tier of rewards. And third, you're probably going to need to pay attention to other sources of gear. Heroic dungeons reward 4 of 8 adventurer gear, so your upgrades are going to be limited. So anything that rewards you with veteran gear will give you a few more upgrades worth of item level to help you tackle the new Mythic 0 dungeons, where you can then pick up champion gear and move on from there. This will probably include any new group events in the open world, as well as the raid on LFR mode. But I think that the main point of these changes is to make Mythic dungeons mean something. They're now going to be worth struggling through to get those higher rewards. They're on par with other endgame activities without you having to deal with the timers and affixes that make Mythic Plus dungeons more complicated and stressful. It's kind of like 5-man raids now, or at least that's where it puts the gear levels. Who knows, maybe in War Within we could see some interesting changes to dungeons themselves that work alongside these difficulty adjustments to make dungeons better than ever before.
Chat, calm the fuck down, chat. Jesus Christ, man. Guys all bitching about me. I am Samiccus, the most skilled blood DK you've ever seen on any server ever. I'm a legend in my own mind. You guys gotta calm down, alright? I can hold aggro on everything, including your mom. Everyone just chill. Jesus Christ.
4. Now, there are some other notes about these changes included in the blue post that are pretty important. So, Flightstone earnings should scale in the same way they did for previous seasons. Bonus Flightstones for increasing any party member's score will remain. Whelpling crests will no longer be available from Mythic Plus dungeons. Mythic Zero dungeons will reward 10 Drake crests upon completion. Worm crests are going to drop from +2 to +5 keys, while Aspect crests will drop from +6 keys and above. So, most of these rewards will work in more or less the same way as they did before.
Aspect crest +6 and above, that's good. That's good. What is it right now? I don't know. I just do +20 because, I'm like that. But yeah, that's great. +6. Oh, okay, that's what a +16 is. Exactly. So you just put a 1 in front of these numbers and you could figure out what the difficulty level is going to be. Again, now the numbers just mean more. But yeah, essentially a +6 is what a 16 is today.
These rewards will work in more or less the same way as they did before. We also now know that the Season 4 dungeon pool will be the 8 original Dragonflight dungeons, which would make this the first time we've seen all 8 together in the Mythic Plus system. This also makes a lot of sense progression-wise. We'll be doing the same 8 dungeons through Heroic, Mythic Zero, and Mythic Plus this time, so learning mechanics should be...
yeah, I understand. I kind of wish they would have done something cool like Scarlet Monastery Mythic Plus or something. I really think the beginning of an expansion should start out this way. I feel like the first season of Mythic Plus should start out this way. Because everybody's excited about the new dungeons. The new dungeons are cool. We just ran them. We are questing. So, start the first season off with all dungeons from the current expansion. And then start to mix it up. Because then we get fatigued by them. I don't really like going back to them at the end. I feel like at the end we should get something special. Like I said, like a Scarlet Monastery season. Some really cool old stuff. I wish that's what they would have done. Sam depletes his +20 key every week. No, I don't. Fuck, silly, not new coup. I know. I trust me. As a no coup defensive is my absolute nightmare as a tank. I hate that place, and I'm gonna absolutely dread doing it again. Sam, prove him wrong. Do a Mythic +10 tomorrow. I will.
Through Heroic, Mythic Zero, and Mythic Plus this time, so learning mechanics should be more straightforward when compared to previous seasons, where we had all the dungeons making up at least half of the Mythic Plus dungeon pool. Another interesting knock-on effect these changes are going to have relate to some weekly event quests, mainly the Mythic Dungeon Weekly Event quest. If that quest remains the same going forward and you have to complete 4 Mythic dungeons, that will be significantly harder and more involved in Season 4 when compared to previous seasons, but I imagine the dev team would change the requirements to 4 Heroic dungeons instead to keep the difficulty of completing the weekly event the same. Arguably, that would actually make it easier, as you would be able to randomly queue for Heroic dungeons, cutting out the part where you need to manually form a group, and Heroic dungeons are shaping up to be easier than Mythic Zeros were previously, so either way you slice it, I think the weekly dungeon event is either going to be much harder or a little bit easier in Season 4. This will definitely be something to keep an eye on either way. But perhaps one of the most important little details that a lot of folks probably missed is that on the chart showing the old versus new difficulty points, the new stuff is labeled Season 4 and 11.0. So these changes aren't just for Season 4 and the end of Dragonflight.
Obviously, they want to take it forward.
This is how dungeons will work for the War Within expansion as well. I am really curious.
I'm glad that they're doing it now, though, because they can make changes to it if it turns out to be a complete shit show. Like I said, if you're going to do anything with a season, introduce some new style of doing something, the best time to do it is now. At the end of an expansion, you can experiment a little bit, see what's going on, and then adjust accordingly.
to see how players react to these changes.
They've been listening to
Personally,
feedback
I think I'm
too,
going to
so I'm
really
sure they
enjoy
will
this
here.
streamlined setup. I basically ignored heroic dungeons past the first few days of hitting max level right at the very start of the expansion, and we've always jumped straight into Mythic Plus whenever a new season comes around.
Yeah,
so with these
as have I.
changes, heroic dungeons stay relevant for much longer, Mythic dungeons start off with more of a challenge and reward way better gear, and the Mythic Plus system is more condensed, and on top of all of that, it's going to be easier and faster to gear up your ult later on through heroic dungeons. Those are all pretty big positives for me, but what do you think from what you've seen so far? Will these changes have a positive or a negative impact on how you interact with dungeons, and do you think you will approach dungeons differently moving forward?
I think it's
if you're a
good.
player who doesn't usually do Mythic Plus keys, are you interested in trying the higher version of Mythic Zero now that it has no timer or affixes? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon and to all of our members here on YouTube. You can see the names floating
Very
on
nice.
screen.
Great
If you'd
video.
like to add your name to the end of every video with a special shout out at the start of the next video, you can find links in the description over to Patreon or click the join button just below this video. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss another video. Thanks for watching, folks. Good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.
Yeah, great video. Am I going to do PTR? No, I'm not usually a PTR guy. I'm not. I like to play the live game, get into something, and see it for the first time when it goes live. This was a great video. I think Season 4 is going to be good. I like that they're experimenting a little, trying to make, everything more relevant. I think they saw that nobody was doing heroic, so make heroic relevant again. I think they also saw that people, you do keys right now, and they mean absolutely nothing. You don't know what the hell the key level means between a 13 and a 14, so squish it down, give better gear, and make the keys more relevant. I think these are all good changes, and the best part is, if it turns out to be like a mistake or they need to adjust better, who cares? It's the last season of this expansion. It's all going to be irrelevant when 11.0 comes out, so experiment now and fix it for the War Within. This is perfect. I honestly like the changes. Makes the content accessible and more difficult, like it was back in Legion. Exactly. See, I think some of chat misunderstood me when I'm saying get rid of Mythic. Do this for raiding. But what I'm saying, I'm not saying make raiding easier. I'm saying make the heroic raiding a bit more difficult, kind of like what they did with Mythic Plus here. They're not making Mythic Plus easier here. It's actually the opposite. They're making it a bit harder. They're moving everything down the line, but they're also making a lot of it more accessible. And that's what's important here. Make heroic raiding. Do the same thing with raiding. Make heroic raiding a bit harder, because right now the difference between normal and heroic, there are differences, but it's not enough. Make heroic a bit more difficult, make it give the best gear. Mythic raiding can be what it is, a race to world first event, and then just the transmog shit. That's it.